Welcome to the Woodridge Baptist Church podcast. For more information about what's happening in the life of our church, visit our website at www.woodridge.org. Enjoy the podcast.
We've been in this series on sharing Jesus without freaking out for a few weeks so that you would share Jesus without freaking out. That's basically why we're doing it, right? I didn't hide it in the title. We've looked at a couple of things, never underestimate the power of hospitality. You see in the practices of the early church that the early church would open up their homes, they would welcome people in, they would have a meal together, and they would talk about God. And it was amazing what you can do when you sit down over a meal and you talk about God with people. Just last week, we talked about never underestimating the power of a personal invitation. Almost 90% of Americans have said that they would be willing to go to church if somebody would invite them to church. It's just that nobody's inviting them to church. So it's like, I'm open, just would you invite me? And it seems kind of weird because you go, well, gosh, we do worship at 9 and 10:30 on a Sunday morning, and then you have all these churches across the United States. You just kind of think, hey, if I want to go to church, I'll just walk in the door. But sometimes the gap that's there is more like this. They feel like this is our space. People that aren't Christians feel like that's a space for Christians. And an invitation is something that is important. And I get that. That makes a lot of sense to me. So never underestimate the power of hospitality, seeing your home as a place for ministry and not just a place that you dwell. And then seeing the power of an invitation because, well, people will respond. It's just, are we doing it? The truth is a lot of the people that we're going to be sharing Jesus with is probably going to happen like this. It's just a relationship that you've got. One that just the good Lord just brought right in front of you. You became friends with them. You know that they don't know the Lord. You want them to know the Lord. And then you just kind of wait for those moments where the door opens up where you can share the Lord. That's the primary way that Christians actually do share. And our opportunities are unique. You're different from me. I'm different from you too. And that's perfectly fine. Our opportunities are going to be unique. I think about when I came here, or not long after I came here, I made a new friend named Sarah. And Sarah is down in the city. She has this ministry called Theology by the Pint. And what they do is, and what she does, is she brings people together to discuss some of the really important, ethical, moral, theological issues that are in front of us today. And she'll have a person on one side, she'll have a person on a completely different side, and they each kind of talk about things, and then you open it up to the crowd, and you get questions. Over the years, I've been blown away at the kinds of questions that have been asked. But this is one of the ways that the Lord has kind of uniquely, I think, a ministry that he's given to me to come and be a part of. That's not for everybody. You understand what I'm saying? But it is for me. And to take all the years of study, and if I can be of good use, to go down into the city and that we can talk about these things, and hopefully in a way so that people can hear the gospel. Man, I'm like, count me in. That was one. But I was also thinking about another really amazing story. This was a long time ago, when I was teaching at A&M. And we had to kind of share the intro classes. You understand what I mean? The professors, so like intro to philosophy, intro to ethics, those kinds of things. And so I was teaching this intro to philosophy class. Well, I had people from all over the world in my class there at A&M. And we would be studying a lot of things, but one of which was we get to the section where we talk about arguments for and against the existence of God. As you can imagine, class wasn't boring. Yep, we had a great time. But we were getting to the end of the section, and we were talking about the problem of evil. And I'd finished the class, and I was like, okay, we're good. It was a Friday afternoon, not the best time in the world to be teaching, right? The students are already onto the weekend in their mind, but there we were. And so we were talking about the problem of evil. Well, the thing was, class comes to an end. I'm like, hope you have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. I'll see you on Monday, because it was a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday class. And I had a whole group of students come up when it was over with, and they're like, don't know if you're open to this, but would you be willing to stick around and continue the conversation? And I said, the answer is yes, but you have to understand something. We're all on our own time now, right? I'm not doing this as an employee of Texas A&M University. I'm doing this because I just want to be here and to be with you. And they're like, perfect. That sounds great. Well, 2 hours later, we're still sitting in that classroom. And everything just keeps going. And I'm hearing all the things that people are struggling with when it comes to their belief in God. At a certain point, I was like, you know what? I want coffee. And so whoever wants to go over to, and there used to be a coffee shop at the foot of appropriately named Evans Library, because I felt like I lived in there on the 6th floor specifically to study, but whatever. There was a coffee shop at the bottom called Poor Yorick's, which is named after Shakespeare, for those of you that read Shakespeare. And I was like, I'm going over to Poor Yorick's, and whoever wants to go can go. So now you've got me with a big herd of students walking across the campus to Yorick's, and we pack the place out, and the conversation goes for over 2 more hours. So at one point I look and I go, I need to call Wendy. I mean, class was over a long time ago. And so I gave her a call, hey, I'm good. I just need you to know what's going on. I'm not leaving until this is over. I didn't get home till 9 that night. I think people have questions. What do you think? I do think people have questions. I believe that there are answers that are out there. What I hope that what I'm doing is I hope that you're being encouraged by the stories that are there, that if you make yourself available, you're not going to have all the answers, but if you make yourself available, it's amazing what the Lord can do. But I will be honest with you, you will face challenges. You will. It's a fact. Some of those are spiritual challenges. Think about what Paul said in 1 Thessalonians 2:18. He said, I wanted to come to you, but Satan hindered us. Now, don't fool yourself. I mean, there are principalities and powers in the unseen realm that work against you as you follow and declare Jesus' name. They will work against you. And that can manifest itself in a number of different ways. But for Paul, he was sitting there going, I couldn't literally get to you. That was one of the ways. But there are other challenges too. Some of these are more personal. For example, and I'm just going to say it, for too many Christians have just an anemic, powerless, prayerless life. I mean, it's non-existent. And when you think about that, it doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, you have the opportunity to talk with God, to share your heart with God, but also to listen to God. You have this opportunity. And if we're not praying, if we're not spending time with the Lord, if we're not listening, we can become disconnected to his voice. We can become disconnected to when he's saying, hey, Jeremy, here's something that I want you to do. We can become disconnected from his promptings. We can become disconnected from a lot of things, including opportunities. He's like, I wanted you to do some stuff. You just weren't listening. And prayer is the way that we listen. I think that can be an obstacle in this. I think another obstacle could be this. We just got sin in our heart, which, shock of the world, that's everybody in the room, right? That's all of us. But then it becomes the reason we don't share Jesus. I was thinking about that this week. If that were the case, I don't know that I would have ever started sharing Jesus. I mean, he's still working stuff out in me. I'm not gonna wait for sinless perfection and go, now that I'm there, have I got a story for you? I mean, what I am is I'm a sinner talking to other sinners, but I'm a sinner that's found hope that wants other sinners to find hope. That's what it's all about. And it can get in the way because we have the fear. Well, what if they point this out about me? Or you're a hypocrite. Well, the truth is we keep coming to church because we already know that about ourselves. We know we're not fully there. We know that we're a work in progress. Let that thing go. That's not an objection to Christianity. That's a reason to not listen. All of these can become obstacles in the way of what Jesus wants us to do. Because remember what he said, go make disciples of all nations. And who did he give it to? All of his followers. All of us. So how do we do it? How do we share Jesus in this cultural moment? And I want you to become more passionate about it. I want you to be more equipped to do it. But think about this passage in Acts chapter 16, 6 through 10. Paul, who I think is the greatest missionary in the history of the world, Paul and Silas traveled through the area of Phrygia and Galatia because the Holy Spirit had prevented them from preaching the word in the province of Asia at that time. Then coming to the borders of Mysia, they headed north to the province of Bithynia. But again, the Spirit of Jesus didn't allow them to go there. So instead, they went on through Mysia to the seaport of Troas. Are y'all following this yet? And that night, here's the part. That night, Paul had a vision. A man from Macedonia and northern Greece was standing there, pleading with him, come over to Macedonia and help us. So we decided to leave for Macedonia at once, having concluded that God was calling us to preach the good news there. Not every obstacle that you face is necessarily from the enemy. Sometimes God is shutting doors because there's another place he wants you to be. There's just another place that he wants you to be. By all appearances, think about this. He goes to a place called Macedonia, right? By all appearances, the Macedonians, they had it all. They had architecture. It was beautiful. Rome had made them incredibly wealthy. As historians would say, it's like there was a doctor on every street. Now think about that. Usually when you've got people with extra money and you've got doctors that can help you when you're sick, you feel like you've got everything that you pretty much need. Sounds a lot like Kingwood, frankly. Am I right? Or am I right? And as a result, there's not this felt need. There's not this felt need for God, which, by the way, completely misses the point on why we worship God. And we don't really worship God to make sure that God just keeps things coming our way. That's not worship at all. That's using, right? But when there's not that felt sense or that felt need for God, people are like, man, I'm good. I'm like, really? How's your soul today? You might have a big house. You might have a personal doctor. How's your soul doing? That's a completely different question. But Paul had a group of people just like that. And here he is on his second missionary journey while he's in Turkey, and the Spirit gives him a vision to go to that place. It's like, I want you to go to Macedonia. And this was the vision, a man begging for help. It's like, please help. And it was very specific. The location was clear. It got me thinking. This goes back. When I was at A&M, I remember when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. And I'm sitting in College Station, it's dinner, Wendy and I are together, and I'm just eating dinner, and then you see the floodwaters just like hitting the city. Do y'all remember that, for those that were around? The floodwaters are just pouring into the city. And I'm just sitting there eating, and I remember looking at her, and I said, you would have to be a nut to move to that place. Well, it wasn't terribly long after that. I was speaking at an academic conference, and when I was done, the provost of the seminary from New Orleans Seminary comes up to me and says, I see that you're teaching at Texas A&M. I said, yeah, that's right. He said, have you ever thought about teaching at a seminary? I said, nope. That was the honest truth. Is that something that you would think about? And I was like, well, probably not. Probably not. Now, what happened was he follows back up with me a little bit later, and he says, we would love to bring you out to the seminary to look around and for you to consider a position that we have. And I was like, okay, I'll go. So I go without Wendy. So I go out there. I start the rounds of interviews and whatnot. I don't know. Because the city, you would have thought Katrina hit it the day before I got there. That place was a dumpster. And I fly back after the first rounds of things, and I'm like, gosh, I don't know. Because, Avery's this big. You're moving into a horrible situation. You have suicide rates had gone up 800%. You had murders happening all over the place because drug lords were trying to take over new territory. It was a hot mess. And so here's what I said. Look, if you want me here, you've got to fly me and Wendy here, and you've got to show her this place for what it really is. Because if we're going to move our family here, we need to move here eyes open. And they're like, okay. So we fly back in, me and Wendy. I go through another round of interviews all morning. They take Wendy out. They're driving all around the city. And to their credit, they're showing her what the city was really like. We get together for lunch because we were going to be meeting with the president and some of the higher ups. And when she walks up to me, and we haven't seen each other all morning, she says, we're going to be here. We're needed here. We're needed here. I said, well, that's great. There's just one thing. I don't have a job offer. I'm not going to move over here for nothing. And then at lunch, we get the offer. And this was what I said to the president, who's a great guy. I just said, I want to go home, and I want to pray about it. We'll call you by the end of the week, and we'll let you know what we're thinking. Perfect. And off we went like a couple of nuts to New Orleans. It's a moment like that. You've got Paul having a vision where a man is saying, please come help. Please come help. And off we go to the lowest paying job offer that I had of all the offers that were out there to me, and it wasn't even close, to a dangerous city because we were needed there. It's exactly where God wanted us to be. The question that I have, though, for you is, do you hear the cry for help? It's out there. Do you hear the cry for help? But the other question that I have for you this morning is, when you hear the cry, what do you do about it? Like, what are you doing about it? I think the answer to that is you take your faith in Jesus and you put it into practice. You do something with it. You put it into practice. Now, speaking to this current cultural moment, I don't know if you know this, but the times have changed. Did you know that? It's just true. If you go back to the 1950s, people had a general understanding of the Bible and the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's just true. It's not true anymore. A lot has changed. A lot has changed. Even if you go like to the 1970s and the 1980s, things changed from the 1950s. If you had gone before the 70s, 80s, had you gone about 40 or 50 years earlier, America was not very multicultural. You come to that time and you saw it kind of start to boom. America was literally changing. You throw before the 70s and 80s, that great moment, going back into the 60s where it was free love and free sex. How'd that work? Not great. But you throw that generation in there. They're asking questions like, well, why can't all religions be true? And what they felt like was needed the most when it came to sharing Jesus was answers to questions that people were asking. In other words, apologetics really started to take a jump. But when you look at where we're at right now, some things have changed again. Since most of our opportunities to share Jesus are relational, they're coming because the main thing that you're seeing out there right now is people are lonely. People are confused. And by the way, because there's a billion voices yapping about everything, people are lonely. They're disconnected. They don't have deep and meaningful relationships out there. There's a crisis among men where men are saying, I don't have anybody that is actually listening to me for what I'm going through. This is the world that we're actually in right now. But it got me thinking, there is a solution to all this. When I go back into my time, yes, I did used to do restaurant management. Don't know if you know that, but I did. And I had been in a car wreck. We were turning left. I was in the passenger seat. This girl ran a red light, hit us doing 60 miles an hour, like knocks us down another road. My head hits the glass. Bam. Now, ever since then, I have had a seizure disorder. Rock your noggin like that, things happen. But I've had a seizure disorder. Well, you know what happens when you get that diagnosis? My license was taken away from me. So I'm like, well, how's this going to work? Because I have to get to the other side of Dallas to do my job, and I can't drive there. And so what happened was I had a guy that worked there that started picking me up to go to work. Now, this was one of the darkest people I think that I've met, maybe in my life. I remember one time he took me over to the place that he lived, and when I walked in, literally every window was completely blacked out. And this is in the day of DVDs, you understand what I'm saying, where you couldn't just stream everything that you wanted to. Every DVD that guy had was demonic. I'm not making that up. So it's not just that the place that he lived was physically dark, it was everything about the space was dark. But because he and I got to have these journeys in a car to work every day, and he was super kind just to do that. One of the most profane people I think I'd ever been around in my life. It was really something. But there we were driving around Dallas together, and God just gave us the opportunity. And I wondered, this was a lot of years later, after sharing Jesus with this guy kind of over and over and over, and then God takes us away. He takes us back down to College Station. And years later, I just kind of sit there. You ever have that moment? And I go, man, I wonder what happened to that guy. Because when I was there, he had never come to faith. I wonder what happened to that guy. And this is one of the good uses of social media, people. I was like, I'm about to do some research. Yeah? So I'm looking up like this. And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, Wendy was right by me. I'm looking at everything. The guy ends up giving his life to the Lord. He ends up going and graduating from a Christian university. And I'm sitting there just looking at his scroll going, that's unbelievable. And I remember sharing that with Wendy, and even she's sitting over there going, man, I didn't see that one coming. I mean, when we say that this is one of the darkest people, it's true. I wasn't the one that led this guy to God. I wasn't. But there was somebody that followed in my footsteps that picked up where I left off. I was just throwing some seeds, my friends. I was really struck this week. There's a Bible teacher, scholar named Christopher Yuan. Don't know if you've ever heard of him. But a couple of weeks ago, he had a really tragic accident where he fell and he had a massive spinal injury. As a result, he's been paralyzed from the neck down. It's really a pretty sad story. So he's in the hospital. Sorry, seasonal allergies. So he's in the hospital, and his wife updates something on his Twitter, his ex, whatever. She updates something. She said, I just wanted to give you all a word of encouragement about Christopher. So he was in the hospital. He's laying in his bed. As she pointed out, he has a suite mate, and they're divided by a curtain. He still can't move, so he's just laying in the bed and kind of facing this direction. At about 2 a.m, suite mate on the other side of the curtain starts to have a conversation with him. And over the course of 3 hours, where Christopher is just laying there on his side and he literally can't move, he starts to talk with him about Jesus. And at 5 a.m, he leads that guy to Christ right there. What an amazing story. But I love what she said. She said, what a precious reminder that even in suffering, God's purposes prevail. I'm pretty confident that he doesn't want to be in a hospital paralyzed from the neck down. What do you think? But both of them are confident that even in suffering, God's purposes prevail. Friends, it's not that people aren't wondering about things. People are wondering about things. There's a reason that students at A&M said, would you be willing to just stick around? And they're asking questions. And it's because they're wanting some answers. These are questions that need to be asked. And experience is not going to let you off the hook. It will confront you whether you want to or not. Suffering and evil is just one of those examples. But the truth is, everybody is saying something about the nature of reality. If you say God doesn't exist, you're saying that's the way the reality actually is. If you say God exists, well, guess what? Same thing. Everybody is saying something about ethics. Don't believe me? Just get on social media for a while. Not too long because hello. Everybody is saying something about what the meaning of life actually is. Everybody. And everybody wants to know an answer to that question. Literally everybody. If you look at what's happening in America, I think Tim Keller had something that was particularly helpful for us, though. He said, the problem is not are people worshiping. People are worshiping. He said, the problem is people are worshiping the wrong things. He wrote a book called Counterfeit Gods. Listen to what he has to say. He said, an idol is anything more important to you than God. Anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God. Anything that is so central and essential to your life that should you lose it, your life would feel hardly worth living anymore. It's not a question of are Americans idolatrous, because the answer is yes and on steroids. The question is, what are our idols? And by the way, Christians, we can have them too. We're not off the hook. We can have things that become so central and essential to our life that if I lost it and if you lost it, you wouldn't think that your life is worth living anymore. That's what my life was all about. And it's not. Paul summarized the history of the human race in one sentence. They worshiped and served created things rather than the Creator. Romans 1:25. And here's what that means. Every human being must live for something. And we do. It's just, are we living for the right things? Something captures our imagination. Something captures our heart at its most fundamental level. Something captures our allegiance, and we give ourselves over to it completely. And here's the proof. It is what you're giving your time to. It is what you're giving your resources to. It is what you're giving your affections to. That's probably your idol. That's probably it. But the solution to all this is not that you just know what it is. It's that you have to replace it. The idol has to die. It has to go. I'm reminded of this story in the Gospels. There was a man that was possessed, and he comes to Jesus. Jesus casts out the demon. And what he says to him is basically, what are you doing after this? Because if it's nothing, then the demon's going to come back with friends. What he's trying to do is to replace things and to fill the space so that the evil that you've let inhabit it doesn't have the hold on you like it has. It's not just about knowing what the idol is, it's that the idol's got to die. And we're all idolaters. I love what Keller said. He said, the only way to free ourselves from the destructive influence of counterfeit gods is to turn back to the true one living God. And he's right. He's right. Okay, so let's think about my students at A&M. So we're at Poor Yorick's, I needed a call. I was tired, y'all. I'd already taught 3 classes that day, and there we are. There was a question that a student asked, and he said, okay, we've talked about a lot. I was like, yeah, I know. He's like, so why Christianity? He was Muslim, by the way. He's like, why Christianity? I said, it's pretty simple. I said, for everything that we've talked about today, which is important, and I understand why we have, I said, it's because Jesus rose from the dead. That's why. That's why. And I'm not just the one that said this. Jesus said this way before me. He said, there will be one miracle that will vindicate everything about what I've said and everything that I have done, and it is my resurrection from the dead. That's the one. There's only one game in town that has a story where God saw fit to leave glory, to come to this place, to die on a cross, to defeat death on your behalf, and then by his grace say, and if you want to come on the other side of this, come to me. There is one game in town, and it is him. You need to block out all of the other voices because they're the counterfeits, and it's time to come to the one, the true, and the living risen God. It is Jesus. It is time to come to him. And this is what you find on the other side of this. You bring your sin and your mess to him, and this is what he says. Yep, my grace was sufficient for this because I am what you needed, and I'm glad that you came. Today, this is what we had prayed. For those of you that don't know him, today would be the day that you come to him. It's the day that you come to him.
We hope you have enjoyed the podcast. For more information about our church, visit www.woodridge.org.